Chapter 1. The day he walked away. He left me when I was 7 months pregnant, said the baby would ruin his life. 10 years later, he was dying, begging for a kidney from the same child he never met. I'm Lily Grant, and this is how a man who walked away from his family came back asking for our blood. But what he didn't know was that mercy has its own timing, and mine came too late. The rain had been falling for hours, soft at first, and then heavier, tapping against the windows of our small apartment in Queen Anne. I was folding the tiny onesies I had washed that morning, trying to imagine what my son would look like when he arrived. My mother had called earlier from Spokane, her voice full of excitement and worry, reminding me not to work too much. I told her everything was fine. I didn't tell her that Ethan had stopped coming home for dinner, or that I had learned to sleep on one side of the bed without noticing the empty space next to me. When I heard his key turn in the lock, I felt a small wave of relief. Maybe tonight he would sit with me and talk. Maybe the distance between us wasn't permanent. I wanted to believe that, but the moment he stepped in, I saw it in his face. His tie hung loose, his hair damp from the rain, and his eyes didn't even meet mine. He dropped his jacket over a chair and went straight for the whiskey bottle on the counter. The sound of the glass hitting the counter was sharp, final. I asked him if everything was okay, if the investors had called back about the deal he lost last month. He didn't answer right away. Then he said flat and cold that there was nothing left to talk about. He had been carrying this business on his back for 2 years, and all I did was remind him of what was slipping away. I stood there, holding a tiny blue blanket in my hands, and asked what he meant by that. He laughed under his breath, bitter, said I wouldn't understand because I never took risks. I told him building a family was the biggest risk there was. He said I was wrong, that this wasn't a family, it was a weight. Then he looked at me, at my stomach, and said the words that would stay with me for years, you and that baby will only drag me down. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. The room felt smaller than ever. He went to the bedroom, grabbed his suitcase, and began pulling clothes from the closet without looking at me. The rain outside grew louder, as if trying to fill the silence between us. I asked him to stop, told him we could start over after the baby came, that we just needed to breathe. He zipped the bag and said quietly that he already had. Then he walked out. No door slam, no goodbye, just the sound of his footsteps down the hall and the echo of the elevator closing. I stood in the doorway watching the rain blur the lights of the street below and realized he wasn't coming back. The contractions started before dawn. I tried to breathe through them, thinking they would fade, but they didn't. By the time my mother arrived on the first flight from Spokane, I was doubled over on the couch, clutching my stomach. She rushed me to Swedish Medical Center, her hands steady even though I could see the fear in her eyes. The drive through the rain was a blur of streetlights and pain. I remember her voice telling me to hold on, that I was stronger than I thought. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and new beginnings. I could hear the heartbeat monitor fast and steady, and I held on to that sound like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. When the nurse asked about my husband, I said he was away on business. My mother squeezed my hand and didn't say a word. Hours passed. Between the contractions, I kept thinking about the empty side of the bed, the sound of his voice when he said the baby would drag him down. I promised myself that my child would never feel unwanted. When the pain peaked, I screamed, and my mother whispered in my ear, "Don't cry for him, honey. Cry for life." Noah came early but strong, his tiny cry cutting through everything that had broken inside me. The nurse placed him on my chest, warm and breathing, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. His skin was soft, his fingers curling around mine with more certainty than I had ever felt. My mother cried quietly, brushing his hair back and saying he had my eyes. I nodded, too tired to speak. I thought about the man who should have been there and how far away he already was. The next morning, the sky cleared. I watched the sunlight creep across the hospital floor while Noah slept beside me. The nurse brought in a small bundle of papers. "Mail," she said. I opened it without thinking. It was a packet from a law firm in downtown Seattle. Inside were divorce papers, the reason listed in tidy legal print: emotional incompatibility. I stared at the words for a long time. It wasn't anger that came first, it was silence. The kind of silence that wraps itself around you when there's nothing left to break. When my mother came back into the room, I told her he'd filed. She asked if I wanted to fight it. I said no. I didn't want a courtroom to decide what was already gone. I signed where they told me to, my hand steady. That afternoon, when Noah stirred in his crib, I slipped the ring off my finger and placed it in the small box the hospital gave for newborn keepsakes. It lay beside his wristband and the first photograph they had taken of us together. I closed the lid and felt the weight of both endings. Later at home, I stood by the window holding Noah, the city glowing under the evening sun. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, shining like they were made of glass. My mother made tea in the kitchen, humming softly, pretending not to watch me. Noah's tiny heartbeat pressed against my chest, slow and certain. I whispered to him that we would be okay, that I would build a life where he would never have to wonder why someone left. He left to save himself. I stayed to save my child. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you, Chapter 2, 10 Years of Silence. By the time Noah turned 9, our lives had found a rhythm that felt safe. Mornings smelled like coffee and toast, and the sound of my mother's voice filled the kitchen long before I opened my eyes. Our home in Green Lake was small, but full of light, the kind that softened the edges of everything. I ran my financial office out of the converted front room where a second-hand desk and a few neatly stacked folders carried the weight of my independence. The sign outside read, Grant Financial Solutions, and beneath it in smaller letters I had written, Independent Planning for Independent Women. Most days I helped women like me rebuild what life had broken. My mother, Maggie, had moved in when Noah started kindergarten. She said it was temporary, but neither of us tried to change it. She liked being around him, and I liked knowing someone was there when I worked late. At night, she would read to him from old storybooks until his laughter drifted through the hallway. Sometimes I stood in the doorway just to listen. The sound of it steadied me. The bills were steady, too. Rent, utilities, food, the quiet responsibilities of a life that looked simple on the surface. That spring, an old hospital invoice arrived in the mail, a leftover balance from Noah's first-year checkups. It wasn't large, but enough to end the idea I'd been nursing about remodeling the kitchen. I folded the notice and placed it under a stack of documents on my desk. That night, while my mother washed dishes, I sat with my laptop open, scrolling through insurance plans. I wasn't angry, just determined. We didn't have the luxury of waiting for things to go wrong again. Maggie came over with 2 mugs of tea. "You're at it again," she said. "It's late. I'll sleep once I find the right policy," I told her. "The pediatric coverage on ours is outdated." She smiled softly. "You never stop planning, do you? If I stop planning, something breaks." She didn't argue. She just placed a blanket over my shoulders and went to bed. It was around that same time that Ethan's name appeared again, uninvited, in the quiet of my living room. I wasn't looking for him. I was helping a client navigate a business grant when a headline from a lifestyle magazine flashed across my screen. There he was, older but still handsome, his arm around a woman with bright blonde hair and a smile that looked rehearsed. The caption under the photo read, "When the universe gives you a second chance." His name was tagged beside hers, Sabrina Cole, yoga instructor, wellness influencer, Portland. I stared for a moment, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Then I closed the page and whispered, "Then don't waste it." That night, I sat with my mother on the porch while Noah chased fireflies in the yard. She saw the look on my face and asked quietly, "Was it him?" I nodded. "Married again." She sipped her tea and said, "Good. Maybe he'll finally grow up for someone." I wanted to believe that. Maybe people did change. Maybe the years had softened whatever selfishness had driven him away. I told myself it didn't matter anymore, but deep down I knew time never erased the shape of absence. It just built new routines around it. Noah started asking questions that year, small ones at first. "Who taught you to drive, Mom? Where did I get my brown eyes?" Then one night, as I tucked him into bed, he asked what every child eventually asks. "Mom, why don't I have a dad like everyone else?" I froze. The question hung between us like a weight. He looked up at me, waiting, his fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. I sat down beside him and brushed his hair back. "You do," I said. "You just have me instead." He frowned. "That's not the same." "No," I admitted. "It's not, but it's enough." He studied my face for a long moment, as if testing whether he could trust that answer, then nodded and whispered, "Okay." When he fell asleep, I stood by his bed and whispered to the dark, "That's more than enough." Life went back to its usual rhythm until one night in late November. Noah came home from school complaining of stomach pain. I thought it was just something he ate. He skipped dinner, went to bed early, but by midnight I heard him crying. His forehead burned with fever. I grabbed my keys and called out to my mother. She was already up pulling on her coat. We drove through the empty streets to Harborview Medical Center. The fluorescent lights made everything too bright. A nurse led us to a small room in pediatrics while Noah clutched my hand, trying not to cry. The doctor on duty was calm, kind of woman named Celia Hayes, with sharp eyes and a patient voice. She ordered blood tests and told us to wait. The hours stretched thin. My mother fell asleep in the chair beside me, her hands folded tight. When Dr. Hayes returned, she was smiling, but I saw the professional caution in her face. She sat beside me and said, "They found mild kidney dysfunction markers, nothing serious, but worth watching. It could be a minor anomaly, maybe even temporary, but she suggested a follow-up every few months. She mentioned a possible genetic component, asked about family history. I told her Noah's father wasn't in contact. Her eyes softened, but she didn't press. She just said we'd keep an eye on it. Driving home, Noah slept in the back seat. My mother asked if I was all right. "He's fine," I said. She glanced at me. "I meant you," she replied. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I'm fine too, but fine is a word that hides everything." That night, after tucking Noah in, I sat at my desk and read the medical summary again. The words mild and monitor echoed in my head. I tried to convince myself it was routine, but something in me shifted. I remembered the way Ethan looked the last time I saw him, hollowed by ambition. His bloodshot eyes, the way he never mentioned family medical issues. I realized how little I had known him, how little I still knew. Over the next few weeks, life went on as usual. Work picked up before tax season. I helped a widow refinance her home, guided a young mother through her first business budget. Every woman who walked into my office carried her own version of survival. I listened, calculated, reassured, all while hiding the quiet worry that sat at the back of my mind like a shadow. In February, Noah brought home a school project about family trees. He filled out what he could and left the rest blank. I looked over his shoulder and said, "It's okay to leave some branches empty." He smiled and asked if we could plant a real tree instead. So we did, in the small patch of soil behind the house. He called it ours. Spring came early that year. The light lingered longer each evening, reflecting off the lake near our street. We settled into Small Joy's ice cream on weekends, movies on the couch, the smell of my mother's apple pie drifting through the house. The world felt kind again, at least for a while. On the day of Noah's next checkup, Dr. Hayes confirmed the markers hadn't worsened. She said his kidneys were functioning well, that we should keep regular appointments, but there was no reason to panic. I nodded, relief washing through me in quiet waves. As we left her office, Noah reached for my hand, swinging it like he used to when he was little. That night after he fell asleep, I sat alone with the papers in my lap. The medical forms, the insurance documents, the patient summary. I stared at the line that read mild kidney dysfunction monitor as needed. The words were harmless on paper, but they stayed with me. I folded the results and placed them in the drawer beside the ring box I hadn't opened in years. The house was still the only sound, the faint hum of the refrigerator. We were both fine. I just didn't know how much that sentence would matter. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you, Chapter 3. The Call He Never Deserved. The new year opened with rain that would not quit and a calendar packed with tax prep meetings. I was with a client at the small table in my front office, running through a list of deductions when my phone lit up with a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it. The second buzz felt like a tug. I excused myself, stepped into the hall, and answered. "Lily, it is Ethan. I am at Harborview. I need a kidney. They said Noah is a match." The hallway tilted. The sound of cars on the wet street drifted through the glass, and for a moment I could hear nothing else. I pressed my back against the wall and tried to breathe. "You left us 10 years ago. Do not say his name now." "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have said it like that. Please, I am sick. They say it is end stage. They did the preliminary blood work and my best chance is family. They said a child can be a match. Do not call here again. Please, Lily." I ended the call and stood very still. The trees across the street were black against a gray sky. In the office, my client waited with her hands folded around a pen, unaware that the ground under my life had shifted. I went back in, finished the meeting, collected the papers with careful hands, and smiled the way you smile when you are holding a glass full to the edge and any move will spill it. When the door closed behind her, I locked it. I dialed Harborview and asked for Celia Hayes. She was between consults, but the nurse found her. Her voice was steady as always. Doctor, it is Lily Grant. I got a call. My son's father is in your care. He said the hospital told him Noah is a match. There was a pause that felt like a doctor taking a breath before a difficult truth. Lily, I cannot discuss another patient. I can clarify policy. This hospital does not allow organ donation from a minor to a parent. The ethics board would not approve it. We do not test children for living donation to adult relatives. If any staff member suggested otherwise, that is a misunderstanding. I closed my eyes and the room came back into focus. So there is no scenario where they would consider Noah. No scenario. I'm sorry you received a call like that. If you want, I can note your file. No evaluations for living donation for Noah. We will continue his routine labs as scheduled. Those have been stable. Thank you. After I hung up, I called Ava Morales. She answered on the second ring. I have 10 minutes between hearings. Are you okay? I got a call from Ethan. He is in renal failure. He said the hospital thinks Noah is a match. Ava exhaled through her teeth. No hospital in this state allows living kidney donation from a minor to a parent. None. The law and the ethics rules are on your side. You are safe to refuse. Also, he has no legal ground to demand contact with your son for medical reasons. That ship sailed with the custody orders. I will send you a brief summary in writing. Send it, I said. I want it in a folder where I can touch it. You are not obligated to manage his crisis. You do not owe him your peace. Call me if he contacts you again. I can draft a formal notice to his counsel if needed. Thank you. When I ended the call, my hands were shaking. I took a long, slow breath, then another. I could feel my heart returning to its normal pace the way a storm moves out to sea and the air settles. Noah came home at 3 with his backpack half open and his cheeks red from running. He did his homework at the kitchen table, while my mother chopped carrots and told a story about a bird that kept visiting the back fence. I sat with a cup of tea I did not drink. When Noah finished, he drew cars across a sheet of paper in careful lines and filled one of them with a bright slash of red. That night after he was in bed, I told my mother about the call. We sat on the sofa with the curtains open to the dark. The rain had paused and the streetlights made the pavement shine. He said the hospital told him Noah is a match, I said. She frowned the way people frown when they feel insulted on your behalf. What did the doctor say? The policy forbids it. They do not even test minors for that. Ava confirmed there is no legal path for him to force anything. It is a clear no. My mother nodded. Then she looked at me for a long time, and when she spoke, her voice was very gentle. Mercy is not weakness. I stared at the window at the reflection of our living room in the glass. It is just not my job to save him anymore. The next morning, I called the unit clerk at Harborview and asked to be connected to the social worker assigned to his case. A man named Benton called back. I explained that I did not want my son contacted, that any questions related to family donors should be directed to adult relatives. He was professional and careful. We would never contact a minor for living donation, he said. I will make sure the chart notes reflect no contact with the child. We can provide information about adult family matching and the paired exchange programs if he asks. Thank you, I said. I appreciate it. I spent the day in meetings, moved numbers from column to column, wrote emails about interest rates and savings windows, and all the while my mind walked a different hallway. In the afternoon, I drove to Harborview and parked on the second level of the garage, the same level where I had parked the night Noah was born. The elevator smelled like disinfectant and something floral. I asked for medical intensive care and signed in. He was thinner than I remembered, his face hollow, his eyes too large. There were lines between his eyebrows I had never seen. The beard made him look older than 40. When he saw me, he tried to push himself up, then settled back against the pillows. His voice sounded like it had been dragged across gravel. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes, I said. He closed his eyes like he was steadying himself. I was scared back then. I kept my hands at my sides and my voice even. I was pregnant back then. His breath hitched. He nodded. I know. I know. I do not have excuses. I thought I was drowning and that leaving would buy me air. I was wrong. I have been wrong for a long time. You called me to say that, or to ask me to hand you my son's body. He flinched. They told me family donors are the best chance. I panicked. I thought of Noah. I should not have said it. I am sorry. We are not discussing my son. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Can I meet him? He asked. Just once. To tell him I am sorry. No. He swallowed. The machines hummed around us, steady and indifferent. I know I do not deserve it, he said. I just thought maybe. You thought wrong. Tears spilled over, and he pressed his lips together like he was trying to hold his face in place. I am going to try to find other donors, he said. My brother, maybe. I have not spoken to him in years. I made a lot of enemies. You made choices, I said. I looked at the whiteboard on the wall where a nurse had written goals for the day: pain control, mobility, family support. I wondered who had stood in this room and claimed that last line for him. I wondered if anyone had. He looked at me with a kind of quiet I did not recognize, something like surrender. I know you will not help me, he said. I know I do not get to ask you for anything. I wanted to say that out loud so I would stop hoping. Good, I said. It will make this next part easier to hear. Do not contact me again. Do not contact my son. If you attempt to reach him, I will involve counsel. If a member of your care team mentions him to you again, tell them the answer is no. Let them note it. Let them move on. He nodded. A nurse stepped in to check his lines. I turned toward the door. Lily, he said. I stopped but did not face him. If I get out of here, I will make it right. You cannot, I said. You can only stop making it worse. Outside the unit, the hallway smelled like coffee and saline. I pressed the down button and felt the weight of the day settle into my shoulders. In the lobby, I sat for a moment on a chair near the plants and watched a little boy take careful steps between his parents. He was gripping a red toy car. When he almost fell, they both reached for him. He laughed and kept walking. That night, I told my mother he had asked to meet Noah. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them and shook her head. No. I know, I said. She reached for my hand and squeezed. You are doing the right thing. Right and easy are not the same thing. I went to Noah's room and sat on the floor while he colored. He had drawn a road that looped around the page and overlapped itself. In the corner, he had filled a square with red. He glanced up at me and smiled. Do you like it? I do. What does the red mean? He asked. I wanted it to mean something. I looked at the square and felt a tightness in my throat. It means the car knows where it came from, I said. It means it has a heart. He nodded like that made sense and kept drawing. My mother stood in the doorway watching us, her arms folded like she was holding something together. I lay awake later and listened to the house breathe. Rain returned and tapped on the window in a soft, persistent rhythm. I thought about the call and the whiteboard, and the way his voice broke when he said he had hoped. I thought about the quiet relief in me after the doctor and the lawyer both said the word no in ways that sounded like a wall I could lean against. A week passed. I heard nothing. Then a message appeared on my office line from the hospital social worker. He said that adult family had been contacted about evaluation and that there was nothing further needed from me. He thanked me for my time. His voice was professional to the point of kindness. I checked on Noah more often that week, even though he was fine. I packed his lunch with care, cut the apple into neat slices, wrote a note on a small square of paper that said, "Do your best," and tucked it where he would find it. He came home with dirt on his knees and a smile that knocked me back to when he was 3 and discovered he could run faster than his shadow. On Friday afternoon, he sat at the table with a fresh sheet of paper, his brow furrowed. He chose a red pencil and pressed it hard enough to leave an imprint even after the color. He drew a line that looked like a vein and another that looked like a river. He did not notice me watching. I waited until he lifted the pencil and exhaled. He asked for our blood. I decided he would only get my silence. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 4. Mercy on the Edge. The call from the social worker came on a gray Monday when the city felt like it was covered in wet wool. He said Ethan had been moved to the medical intensive care unit, that his numbers had worsened over the weekend. He spoke in the careful tone people use when they do not want to push. Adult family had been notified. If I had any questions about boundaries regarding Noah, they were already documented. I thanked him and set the phone down, then stood at the sink and watched the rain streak down the window until the glass blurred. By afternoon, I was in the parking garage at Harborview. Again, second level, same oil stain on the concrete where I had parked the night Noah was born. The elevator doors opened with a soft sigh. The ICU smelled like bleach and coffee and the quiet hum of machines. A nurse at the desk checked the visitor log and asked me to sanitize my hands, then led me to a small consultation room with 2 chairs and a framed print of a mountain that looked too cheerful for the hallway outside. The attending physician stepped in and introduced herself with a calm shake of the hand. She explained that Ethan's kidney function had dropped further, that he was on dialysis, that his blood pressure was unstable, but they were working it. She spoke in even sentences, each one landing like a small weight on a table. Family evaluators had reached out to adult relatives. She did not say the word hurry, but it hung in the room anyway. "Is there anything you need from me?" I asked. "Only what you have already given," she said. "Your son will not be contacted. That is noted. If you prefer not to be updated, we can limit calls to adult family." "Limit them," I said. "If there is something you must tell me, for legal reasons, call. Otherwise, route everything to adult family." She nodded. "We will do that." On my way out, I passed his room. The curtain was partially drawn enough to see the outline of him. He looked smaller than he had a week before. A nurse stood near the monitors, tapping a screen, her expression professional and kind. I walked past without stopping. I made it to the elevator before I heard his voice. "Lily." I pressed the button and stared at the numbers above the door. I did not turn. "Please," he said. 5 minutes. I turned then because it felt worse to leave without looking at him than to say what I had already decided to say. He was pale, the skin under his eyes a dark half-moon. Tubing looped from his arm to a machine that hummed like a distant refrigerator. There were flowers in a cheap vase on the windowsill. No card. He swallowed. "Please, Lily, do not let me die." I kept my hands folded in front of me so he would not see them shake. "You already did. 10 years ago." His mouth trembled. For a second I thought he would argue. Instead, he looked at his hands and nodded like a man who had finally stopped pretending he could talk his way out of a fire. "I know," he said. "I know what I did. I am asking anyway. I am not asking for your son. I understand that is not possible. I am asking for time, for a chance." "Then take that up with your brother, or with whatever version of faith you have left." He closed his eyes and a tear slid down, quick and embarrassed. He wiped it away with a movement that looked like a boy trying not to get caught crying in gym class. "You have no heart," he said, and it was not cruel. It was tired. I felt the old heat rise behind my ribs, that grief that once had teeth. It did not bite now. It stood there and watched. "I have a heart," I said. "It just belongs to my son." He began to cry then, not loudly, just a steady spill that he tried to hide with the heel of his hand. The nurse stepped back into the room and adjusted a line, her presence a reminder that there were rules even in pain. I took one step back and then another. My fingers brushed the doorframe. "Get some rest," I said. "Let your team do their jobs." "Lily," he said, but I had already turned away. In the lobby, I sat in a chair near the big windows and called my mother. She answered on the first ring. "Do you need me to come?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm about to head home. I just wanted to hear your voice." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I went by the church this morning." I closed my eyes. "You did. Why?" "I needed to sit somewhere that reminds me to breathe." Pastor Ellis was there. We talked a little. What did he say? He said forgiveness is not forgetting. He said it is closing the door without locking it. You can stand on your side. He can stand on his. It is still closed. I let the words settle. They felt like a blanket that had been warmed in a dryer and placed across my knees. I did not know yet if they would keep me warm, but I did not push them away. "Thank you," I said. On Tuesday afternoon, the social worker called again. There was a new development. An adult relative had come in for evaluation, and preliminary labs suggested a good chance of match. I sat at my desk with the receiver pressed to my ear and waited for him to say the name. He did not, and I did not ask. "Thank you for the update," I said. "Please keep everything with adult family." He understood. He hung up. I sat there for a moment, then stood and went to the front window. A man was standing by the curb looking at my office sign. He wore a dark jacket, no umbrella hair, damp with rain. When he turned, I knew him. It took a second because it had been years, but I knew those eyes. Softer than Ethan's, steadier. When he stepped inside, he removed his jacket and held it in his hands. Water dripped to the mat. Lily, he said, and his voice had the plain honesty of the boy he once was. I am Liam. I offered him a towel from the bathroom. He thanked me and rubbed the back of his neck with it like he had forgotten how to be indoors. Do you have a minute, he asked. 2, I said. He took the chair across from my desk and set his jacket on his lap. He looked at the diploma on the wall and then at the photo of Noah in a paper cap on his first day of kindergarten. He cleared his throat. I know I have not earned the right to be here. I should have reached out years ago. I did not. That is on me. What do you want, Liam? I came to say I am being tested. For donation. The room narrowed around those words. For a moment, all I heard was the rain. Tested, I said. He nodded. They drew blood this morning. They will do more if it looks good. Why? He looked down at his hands. Because he is my brother. I know what he did. I know what he did to you. I know I do not get to fix that, but I can fix this part. He ruined my life, I said, and I felt the old anger look up again, curious. He ruined yours, too. He pushed everyone away. Liam nodded and his eyes filled. He blinked hard. Yes, he did. He burned his bridges and salted the ashes. I walked away because he made everything a fight. I am not here to defend him. I am here to do something I can live with. I studied his face. He looked like the version of Ethan that had never learned to lie to himself. It made everything more painful and also less. Then make sure saving him does not ruin yours. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. That is the plan. He stood to leave, then paused. I will not bother you again, he said. I just wanted you to hear it from me. If you never want to know how it turns out, I will respect that. Thank you, I said. And Liam, he looked up. Good luck. He nodded and left. Through the window, I watched him cross the street. He did not look back. That night, my mother made soup, and Noah talked about a field trip to the museum where he had seen a dinosaur that looked like a dragon, but nicer. After dinner, he drew a picture of it with red and blue pencils and handed it to me with a grin that cleared the fog inside my chest. When he was in bed, my mother and I washed dishes in a quiet rhythm. He has a brother, she said. He does. He came to see you. He did. Do you believe him? I do. She dried a plate and set it upside down on the counter. The kitchen light made a halo on the clean surface. Then we pray for good surgery, she said. I did not answer. I did not pray. I stood at the sink and let the hot water run over my hands until the sting brought me back into my body. The hospital called on Thursday. The transplant committee had approved proceeding if final cross-match was compatible. Surgery could be scheduled quickly. The woman on the phone spoke with that careful kindness again. She said they were grateful for family who stepped up. She did not ask if I wanted to be there. I told her to route all updates through adult family. On the morning of the surgery, the city was wrapped in low cloud. I took Noah to school, hugged him a little longer than usual at the gate, and watched him run to his friends. He looked back over his shoulder and waved. I waved back and surprised myself by smiling. My mother met me at the church near our street. The doors were unlocked. We sat in a back pew because she liked the feeling of being held by walls that knew what suffering sounded like. We did not speak for a while. The sanctuary smelled like wood and wax. Pastor Ellis walked down the aisle and stopped when he saw us. He sat on the edge of the pew. How are you? He asked my mother. Then he looked at me. And you? I am not praying for a man who left me while I was pregnant, I said, and my voice echoed more than I intended. He nodded. You do not have to pray for him to wish him well. You can pray for the surgeons, or for the part of yourself that hurts when old wounds are touched. I am not sure I have a prayer for that either. He folded his hands and smiled not with cheer but with understanding. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is closing the door without locking it. You can choose when you open it for air. Until then, it can stay closed. We sat with that for a while. My mother squeezed my hand. I did not pray, but I did breathe. By evening, the social worker called. The surgery had gone forward. There had been a tense hour with a blood pressure drop, but the team stabilized him. The graft was perfusing. Time would tell. I thanked him. When I hung up, I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the yard where the small tree Noah had planted last year, bent under the weight of the rain. My mother came to stand beside me. She put her hand over mine on the sill. Someone carried him today, she said. It was not me, I said. It did not have to be. Later, when the house was quiet, I drove back to the hospital. I did not go up. I stayed in the ground floor hallway near the coffee stand, where volunteers were closing the metal gate. A nurse pushed a cart past, humming an old song under her breath. A young couple sat together on a bench, their fingers woven tight. The elevator doors opened, and a man in scrubs stepped out, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his hand. The building felt like a ship that never docked, always moving in place. I went outside and crossed to the sky bridge that overlooked the street. Cars slid by on the wet pavement, their headlights writing brief sentences across the dark. I pressed my palm to the glass. It was cold and smooth. My reflection looked back at me with my mother's eyes. I felt tired and also strangely awake, as if my life had been running on two tracks and had finally agreed to meet. I did not know the end of the story yet. I only knew this part. He was alive. Not because I made room for him in the house he had abandoned, but because someone else had chosen to carry what he had thrown away. I stood there until my handprint faded, then turned and walked back to the car. He lived because someone else carried the mercy he had thrown away. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The Letter He Never Read. 6 months later, the rain had given way to cold sunlight that lingered low across the Seattle skyline. The leaves at Green Lake had turned the color of rust and honey, and each evening the air carried that quiet sharpness that comes before winter. I had started walking Noah to school again. He was taller now, full of questions and half-jokes that made my mother laugh even when she tried not to. Life had settled into something steady. Work was busy, clients came and went, and sometimes I almost forgot there had been a hospital, a transplant, a man whose name had once shaped everything I feared. Then one afternoon the phone rang while I was closing my office. It was the social worker from Harborview. His voice was gentle but too slow. Ethan's body had rejected the transplant. He had been readmitted, then developed an infection that spread too fast. He passed away 2 nights earlier. There would be a brief service arranged by his brother. I thanked him for letting me know, hung up, and sat in the quiet room until the light from the window slipped across the floor and disappeared. I did not cry. There was nothing left to mourn that had not already been buried years ago. A week later, Liam came by. He looked tired but calmer, the kind of calm that comes when someone has done everything they could. He stood at my doorway with his hands in his pockets and a small envelope in one hand. "This came in the mail," he said. It was forwarded from the hospital. Postmarked last month. I thought it might be for you. I nodded and invited him in. He set the envelope on the counter, its edge damp from the mist outside. The return address was Harborview Medical Center, Organ Donation Department. I felt my stomach tighten. "I did not open it," he said, but I saw enough of the header to realize it was about donation. I figured it was safe to bring it straight here. I picked it up, turned it over, broke the seal, and unfolded the single page. It was an approval notice, the kind that comes after all evaluations are reviewed. Candidate approved for live donation. The letter was dated 3 weeks before the surgery, the one that had saved Ethan's life for a while. I had filled out those forms months before the morning after my first visit to him in the hospital. I had done it quietly, knowing the hospital might never process it in time, knowing I might never go through with it. But I had wanted to try just to see if I could offer something that was not born of bitterness. The letter had come too late, and no one had ever known. Liam studied my face. He never knew, did he? It wasn't for him to know, I said. And it would not have changed anything. He nodded, his eyes soft. He talked about you before the surgery, said he wished he had learned sooner how to say sorry without asking for something in return. I folded the paper back into its envelope. Wishing is easy. He looked down. He was scared near the end, but he was different. Quiet. Maybe that counts for something. Maybe it does, I said. For him. Liam exhaled, a sound between relief and grief. "I just wanted you to have it." He turned toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think he knew you wouldn't let hate keep you from being kind." "I wasn't kind," I said. "I was just done being angry." He nodded again and left. Through the window I watched him walk down the street, the mist swallowing his shape until he disappeared. I looked at the envelope in my hand and felt the weight of what it meant. I had wanted to save him once, not for love, but to prove that pain hadn't hardened me. The universe had other plans. Maybe that was enough. Later that week, Dr. Hayes called. She said she had been asked to relay something from the unit notes. Before his final decline, Ethan had told a nurse that if he lived, he wanted to see Noah and apologize. I listened quietly, and then asked if the nurse had written exactly what he said. She read it out loud. "If I ever get another day, I want to tell my son I am sorry I left." My voice caught, but I said thank you, and told her I appreciated her kindness. After we hung up, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. My mother came out and placed a cup of tea beside me. She didn't ask anything, didn't need to. We sat together in silence, watching the faint line of fog roll across the lake. I thought about how mercy never shows up the way you expect it to. Sometimes it is in a phone call, sometimes in a letter that arrives too late, sometimes in the quiet knowledge that you did what you could, and it was enough. A few days later, I took Noah to Green Lake Park after school. The air was cold enough to make our breath visible. He raced ahead to the swings, then ran back holding something behind his back. "Close your eyes," he said. I did. When I opened them, he handed me a piece of paper from his backpack. It was a drawing of the three of us, simple and bright crayon lines bending where his hand had wobbled. Two tall figures and a smaller one between them, each outlined in blue. Above them, the sun was smiling. He pointed to the smallest figure on the right. "That's him," Noah said. "He's small because he left." I smiled, the kind that feels like it rises from somewhere deep, past all the hurt that used to live there. "That's beautiful, honey. Do you think he's in heaven?" he asked. I looked out at the water, at the light stretching thin across it. "He's where he's meant to be." Noah nodded as if that made perfect sense, then ran toward the swings again. I sat on the bench watching the wind push ripples across the surface of the lake. A few leaves broke free from the branches above and fell onto the path, spinning once before they touched the ground. I felt the faintest pull of tears, but didn't let them fall. That night, after Noah went to bed, I opened the drawer of my desk. The envelope from Harborview rested beside the small box that held my wedding ring and Noah's hospital wristband. I added the letter to the box, closed the lid, and placed it back in the drawer. There was no ceremony, no prayer, just quiet completion. The next morning, I stopped by the office early. The sun was still low, spilling gold light through the window blinds. I watered the fern on the sill, straightened the stack of folders, and glanced at the sign on the door. Grant Financial Solutions. The name still felt right. I locked the door behind me and stepped out into the crisp air. Across the street, my mother waited with Noah, his backpack slung over one shoulder. When he saw me, he ran his shoes slapping against the pavement. I knelt and caught him in my arms. He smelled of soap and fresh air. We walked toward the lake together, hand in hand, the morning full of small sounds, cars in the distance, birds calling from somewhere unseen, the slow whisper of wind moving through leaves. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing behind my ribs, only space. He gave up his family. I gave him mercy, just not in time. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through grace. If you've ever been left behind, remember that silence can speak louder than revenge. It can prove who you are long after the shouting stops. If this story found a place in you, stay, share what it stirred, and let your own proof live quietly, where grace can still be heard.